Hey guys, in this video I want to talk about the problem-solving strategies we use in school. Specifically, we're talking about UPSE and about RUBIES. So as you can see in this picture here, I've got four different stages of solving a problem. First, we have to make sure that we understand the problem, then we plan how we're going to solve it, then we solve it, and lastly, we evaluate our solution, see if we did everything correctly. And so that's UPSE, UPSE, and we also further break that down to RUBIES. So we're going to take a look. You can see again, RUBIES just means you read it first, you understand it, you break it down, you see what the problem's about, you identify what it's trying to test you, you estimate, and then you solve the problem. So I'm going to take a look at an example problem here with you guys, and here's our problem. So in Taylor's class, 2 out of every 3 students reporting having a pet at home. Half of the students with pets had a dog. And I have 4 different parts I have to find. I have to find a proportion that represents how many of the 24 students in the class had pets. I have to find how many students in Taylor's class had pets. I have to write a proportion that represents how many of the students in her class had a dog for a pet. And I need to know how many students in Taylor's class had a dog for a pet. So there's 4 things I need to find. So the first thing I do is I just read it. A good thing to do right after you read it is to write down what it's about. So I'm going to write down, first I'm going to take my paper like this, I'm going to divide it into the 4 sections of UPSE. Okay, so UPSE, make sure I understand the problem. The problem is about this class of students, and some have dogs, some have pets, some have dogs. All right. So just kind of some stuff I remember about the problem. Okay, I have a class of students, and there's a bunch of them have pets, some have dogs. Okay, so that's pretty much what I remember from the problem. Now I need to make sure that I understand what I need to find. So we have this statement called the INTF, or the I need to find. So I'm going to write down my INTF. I need to find. What do I need to find? Well, that depends on what your question is. In this one, there's actually 4 things I need to find. So I need to find, first of all, I need to find a proportion of students with pets. Second thing I need to find is I need to find the number of students with pets. Third, I need to find the proportion of students with dogs. And lastly, I need to find the number of students with dogs. Okay. All of this stuff, this whole first stat, guys, literally it's reading comprehension, right? It's making sure I understand what the problem is saying. It's also a good idea to make sure if there's any words I don't know. So it's a good idea to identify, maybe underline or circle a word you don't know in the problem. In this case, this is pretty simple. Maybe I don't know what a proportion is, so I would circle that one. But everything else, I should be able to know all those words. Okay. We go on to the P step, right? The P stands for plan. So I'm going to start planning how I'm going to solve my questions. I have my questions. I've written them down. I know the 4 things I need to find. So now I'm going to try to figure out how will I find those? How will I answer those? And so the first thing we do is we break it down. So I'm going to write down my RUBIES too. We read it. We wrote our understand, our I need to find. Now we're going to break the problem down. And what that means is I'm going to take all the important numbers and all the important words and write them down. So I have them right in front of me. I can work with them. So in this problem, 2 is important, right? 2 out of 3. If I'm pretty smart, I know that's a fraction, right? 2 out of 3 students have a pet. So that means I have 2 students with pets out of 3 total students. Okay, I'm going to write that down. So 2 students have pets out of every 3 total students. I also have half of the students. So I'm going to write down half of the students with pets had a dog. So that means there's 1 dog. 1 student has a dog out of, that's half of the students with pets, right? So out of the students with pets. My total there. It's not saying half the students have dogs. It's saying half the students who have pets have dogs, right? Okay. Very good. I can break down, and this one I'm going to break down my answer choices too, because number A, or letter A, tells me how many students there are. So I'm going to write that one down too. There's 24 total students. I have some important words here too. I have the word proportion. So if you know what a proportion is, that'd be very useful. A proportion is when you have two ratios or two fractions that are equal to each other. So I'm going to go ahead and set that up over here too. I know you can't see that yet. There it is. Okay, so I'm going to have two fractions. I don't know what goes on the top or the bottom yet, although I have some pretty good ideas. But I know that there's going to be two fractions that are equal to each other. All right, that's breaking it down. So I go on to identifying. Oh, I already answered all these questions, I guess. We're going to talk about hidden questions in just a moment. Or not a moment, but in another video. Do I have any unnecessary information? Sometimes you have extra numbers and words thrown in there. For example, in this one, I don't really have to know, well, most of it's pretty important. I guess I don't have to know Taylor's name, but sometimes they might throw information in there that you don't really need. Sometimes there might be more information that's not in the problem that you do need, so we'll have to go to our reference material. A lot of times in the problems that have to do with geometry, we'll have to go look up a formula that we have to use to find the area of things and things like that. But on this problem, I don't see any hidden questions. I don't see any extra information, really any numbers I'm not going to be using. I don't see any numbers that I need that I don't have. So I think we're good for that one. Just really quick, we're going to identify which, I don't want that to run through by itself. Let's see here. Which part of sixth grade math is this question testing, right? Is it talking about the different kinds of numbers, like whole numbers and rational numbers? Is it talking about expressions and equations? It's talking about ratios and proportions, geometry, data analysis and statistics, or personal financial literacy? Well, in this case, I have a pretty good hint because of the word proportion, right? So I am actually dealing with a ratios and proportions question. All right. Let's estimate. So a couple of these questions, we can't use this for everything. So for example, we couldn't really estimate a proportion representing, but we could estimate how many students in her class had pets, and we could estimate part D, how many students had dogs, right? So I'm going to go ahead and estimate. I forgot to write down my identifying. I'm dealing with proportions. Estimate. Okay, I'm going to estimate part B, which says how many students in Taylor's class had pets. And the way I want to make an estimate, I'm actually going to make three estimates. I'm going to get one that's too low, it's like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, right? I'm going to have one that's too low, one that's too high, and one that's just right. Okay? So again, the question in part B was, how many students in Taylor's class had pets? Well, a number that I know is too high would be 24, because there's only 24 kids, right? It's got to be less than 24 kids who have pets. And a number I know is too low is 0, right? There can't be less than 0 kids. And a good middle number would be, someplace between them. It says 2 out of 3, so it's going to be more than half. But, I'm going to just put maybe 15. Okay, a little bit more than half. So I'm just guessing right now. I haven't done any math. I'm just reading. I know it's more than half, so I'm just going to put 15 as my estimate. And also part D, you'll notice, part D also talks about how many students in Taylor's class had a dog. So I'm going to estimate that too. I'm saying that my guess would be a low and a high. Again, I know it's definitely more than 0 kids had dogs. And I know it's more than half of them. Because half of the pets are dogs, right? So at the very most, if everybody had a pet, that would be 12 dogs. So I can put 12 there, right? So I know my answer is actually going to be between 0 and 12. And based on my guess at 15, half of that would be about 8 or 7. I'll put 8. Okay, there's my guess. So these are estimates. I haven't really done any math. I'm just doing some, strategic guessing. But this will help me when I get to my answers to make sure that I'm in the ballpark. Right? Going on to solving and selecting a strategy to solve, there's lots of strategies here. And these are just, the ones that I use most often. How am I going to solve this question? I could create a table. I could draw some kind of model. I could simplify my numbers and see if I can find a pattern there. On multiple choice questions, this was not a multiple choice, but on multiple choice questions, I could go from the answer choices and work back up to the problem. There's lots of different things I could do. In this problem, I think I will, well, I think we'll just do the math on this one, right? It'll be kind of like making a table, but I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to write out the numbers. So I go on to solving the problem. So it says solve it. So let's see what we can do to solve it. So write a proportion that represents how many of the 24 students in the class had pets. So hopefully I remember what a proportion is. I'm going to solve this thing. A proportion is two fractions that are equal to each other. Okay, so one of my fractions I know for pets is right up here, 2 out of 3. 2 pets out of 3 total kids. And I'm going to write that, actually I want to write this too, so I don't confuse my numbers. So I'm dealing with the number of kids who have pets, and I'm dealing with a total. Okay, so 2 kids have pets out of every 3 total kids. And I also know, I know how many total kids there are. So that's going to go, it's not going to go up here with pets, it's going to go down here with total. And my question is how many kids have pets? So that's my unknown. I'm going to go ahead and use x for my unknown because it's a variable, it's an unknown, right? And x is going to be my answer. It can tell me how many kids have pets. So this is my proportion. That's part A right here. Okay. Part B says to solve it. And part B says to actually solve for x. So there's lots of different ways of solving for proportion. We can look for patterns going right and left. Is there a pattern between 3 and 24? We can go pattern going up and down. We can do the butterfly. So there's lots of different ways of doing this. I think I would like to go look for a pattern. So my question is, how can I get from 3 to 24? And this is a ratio table, so I can use multiplication or division. So how do I get from 3 to 24? Well, I can get from 3 to 24 by multiplying by 8. If I multiply that by 8, I get 3 times 8 is 24. But my rule for the proportion is whatever I do to the one side, whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top as well. So I'm going to multiply. And I'll give you my answer. So my answer is going to be 2 times 8, which is 16. Right? So there are 16 students with pets. Right? Answer choice, or question number C, letter C, right, is a proportion that represents how many of those students in her class had a dog for a pet. So I'm going to write a proportion here. Well, this is going to be a little bit trickier, isn't it? Again, I know I'm going to have 2 fractions that are equal to each other. And I want to know how many students have a dog. Well, how about this? We know that my ratio of my ratio of pets to total students, the number of kids who have pets to the total number of kids is 2 to 3, right? But half of those pets are dogs. Right? So half of those 2 kids, right? There are 2 kids out of every 3 kids who have a pet, but half of those 2 kids have a dog. So half of 2 is 1, right? So I can write down number of kids who have a dog over the total number of kids would be 1 out of 3. Right? 2 out of 3 kids have pets, but half of those 2 kids have a dog, so that'd be 1 out of 3 kids has a dog. And I still have the same number of kids. I don't think my class changed. Just let me check real quick. Okay, it doesn't tell me my class is any different size, so it's still 24 total kids. And I'm going to put a different variable. I'm going to put y to represent the number of kids who have dogs. So there is my proportion for part C. And then lastly, part D, I'm just going to, my work is going to be exactly the same. Here I multiplied by 8, so I'm going to do that same thing for my work here. 3 times 8 is 24, so 1 times 8 will give me my answer. 8 students with dogs. Okay, so there's my problem is solved. Now, I'm done with RUBIES, but I'm not done with UPSE because the last step for UPSE is to evaluate my answer. So first of all, did I answer my questions? I want to compare. I'm actually going to look up here. I had 4 I need defines. First, I had to write a proportion of students with pets. Did I do that? Yeah, here's a proportion of students total with pets. So I got it. Part 2, I'm supposed to find the number of students with pets. Did I do that? I found 16 students with pets. Yep. So well, you can't see that anymore. Yeah, I did that. Part C, I need to find was proportion of students with dogs. Part C, I have a proportion students with dogs. I got that. And part D was finding the number of students with dogs, and I did find a number of students with dogs. So I did answer my I need to find. Does my answer make sense? It makes sense to have 16 people with pets out of a class of 24. It makes sense to have 8 students with dogs. It makes sense. If I had gotten an answer like 160, that wouldn't have made sense. If I got an answer like -8, that wouldn't have made sense. Do my units match the question? My units are about students. So yeah, it matches. Did I make any mistakes in my math? Let me just double check again. 3 times 8 is 24. 3 times 8 is 24. 8, 16, 24. Yep. 2 times 8 is 16. 8 plus 8, yeah, 16. Yep. Okay, so I double checked my math. Everything works there. How did the answer compare to my estimate? I remember when I just guessed, I said it'd be about 15 kids with pets. My answer was actually 16. I was really close. I was really close there. And oh, look, my estimate for my dogs was 8, and I was exactly on. So my estimate was really good. That lets me know that I'm on the right track here. Did anything fail while I was working? Um, in my case, everything worked out pretty well. I don't think I made any mistakes. I did kind of struggle a little bit with finding the proportion for the number of dogs and students. I had to figure it out, how to get half of 2/3. Could I have done something different? That's a good question to ask. I could have, maybe part D, look at this, I could have done that easier. Part D was how many students with dogs. I could have just gotten half of my answer from part B, right? So instead of working out my proportion, I could have just gotten half of 16 is 8. So that might have been better. A table probably would have looked a little bit better, but been cleaner than all this proportions I have here. But I'm not too bad with those proportions. I'm okay with having those. There's no answer choices here, but sometimes when we're looking back, it's a good idea to look at the answer choices and see which ones might have I picked, which ones are the ones that they put there to trap us. How can we change this question? All right, so I could change this question in any way. I could change the number, right? I could change the number of kids in the class. Would that change my answer? Yeah, I mean, if 2 out of every 3 kids has pets, but I change the number of kids, that would change the number of people with pets, right? So the star could give me different numbers of kids in the class. They could give me different numbers, different ratios, right? Instead of 2 out of every 3 kids having pets, it might be half the kids have pets. It might be a percent. It might be 80% of the kids have pets. Right? It might be a different thing. It might be pets. It might be 80% of the kids, have facial hair. Wow, those kids are getting old. But it could be something else. It could be something besides pets. It could be, there's lots of different ways we could change this question. But the idea behind it stays the same. It's still about ratios and proportions and doing the same work. Okay. What did I learn while I was doing this problem? Well, I got better at doing proportions. Right. I learned how to estimate and how to compare that with my final answer, make sure I'm on the right track. And is there anything I'm still unsure about? Yeah, I think so, actually. I think I'm still unsure about how I could write this last proportion. I'm still kind of confused about it. Because, I did it in my head. I took half of 2, but I wonder, how could you write a proportion? Could you write a proportion with all 3 fractions? Could I have 2/3 and 1/2 and something out of 24? I feel like there's maybe a different way of writing that might make more sense rather than just doing that in my head. So I'm kind of unsure about that. And again, here's some other ways to that question about how I could change things. It's always a good idea just to, change problem, make your own problem. Maybe I want to change the answer. Maybe I want to give this was a question without multiple choice questions. There was no multiple choice, right? But I could change this question very easily and make it a multiple choice question. Right? That'd be changing the type of problem this is. I could change the representation. I could maybe put a table in there and ask you to find what the proportion is, or maybe I could put in a graph, right, and ask you to find the table. There's lots of different things we could do. So yeah, as an exit ticket, I could do any of these things. I could let's for this one, maybe I could write down, generalize how I could do this. So for any proportion problem, this is how you solve it. First, you write out your proportions. Second, you plug in your numbers until you have only one of them you don't know. Third, you find a pattern going left to right, or you do the butterfly, cross multiply and divide. Generalizing how you do this. I could connect this problem. You know, Working proportions is very similar to working algebra, right? Because I have this unknown. So we've seen writing equations and expressions for algebra. If I did a cross multiply, if I did a butterfly here, I would actually get an algebraic equation, 3 times x. Remember, so what I'm talking about here is the butterfly. Is one way to solve proportions is by doing the butterfly like this. 3 times x is equal to 2 times 24. Right? So now look what I've done. I've connected this problem with something we've been working on when we got to the algebra unit of how to solve for a variable. Okay? So you see the same kind of math popping up in many different ways. So if I'm really good at solving for an algebraic equation, that can help me when I'm working with proportional questions. Create. I could go on and create my own story problem. Right? I could write my own, very similar to this one, but I don't want it to be about a student with I don't want to be a class with students with dogs and all this stuff. Maybe I want it to be about I don't know, Mr. Baker going to ice cream shop and he's trying to decide what kind of ice cream to buy, right? Create my own thing. And evaluate just means, writing about, the strategies of how I thought about this problem, right? Evaluate. If I said evaluate your work or justify your answers, I'd have to explain how I got what I got, which is basically what I just did during this video, right? Evaluate. I'm talking about the problem, but I'm not just solving. I'm talking about how I'm doing it. I'm talking about what I'm thinking as I'm working through it, what I'm sure about, what I'm unsure about, all these different kinds of things. And this, guys, this is honestly, this is what we did. I mean, this took a long time. This is probably a 15-minute video. I don't know. I don't have a timer up. But this kind of thinking is what mathematicians do. And this is what I expect and I want you to be able to do, is to get really involved in a question, right? We're not just reading it real quickly and bubbling on and go on to the next one. We want to dig deep into it and understand what the math behind what's going on, and being able to communicate that. So that is a model of the UPSE. Again, I know this video was kind of long. I talked everything through. I wrote everything down. This is, for right now, yes, I would like you to be able to, I want to get to a point where I can just show the screen here without all the words on top of it. I guess like this would be fine, right? I want you to be able to do this, to be able to write things down, right? This is my showing my work for one problem. So really, a piece of paper only has room for 2 problems if you do all your steps. And that's fine. We can use paper. Don't be afraid to use paper, use pencils. We're not going to, we're going to recycle this paper afterwards. It's not going to kill the environment. But, to get my thoughts down, be methodical. Math, a lot of math really is just keeping organized, right? And keeping at it until you get the answer, not just giving up. So, yeah. So I do want to see this kind of work. I want to be able to say what we're doing. I guess I didn't show my work on my evaluation, but I asked the questions and I check marked them, right? I checked my work. Everything was good. And by the START test, as you practice this more and more, it'll go faster and faster and faster. So you'll be able to do this in the 4.5 minutes per question that you have. And again, some problems are easier than others. Some don't. You don't have to do this kind of UPSE and problem solve. This is really good for word problems, but some problems it'll just give you a graph and ask you what are the coordinates at this point. You won't have to do a problem solving strategy for it. You just have to count it and find it. Right? So hopefully this gives you an idea of what I'm looking for when I say